Okay, maybe if I was unmuted, that would be better. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Praying everyone has had an amazing day so far. I am Christian McCray Stewart, and I'm the founding attorney of McCray Stewart and Associates. We are your trusted advocates for justice and peace of mind, and we are here for another edition of Wise Counsel Wednesday. And what we do is the opportunity for us to come with various legal topics and allow you, our current clients, past clients, future clients, just the community in general, to come and present your questions, legal questions that you have, and we provide the answers for you, right? One thing that I do want to preference is the fact that we're doing this and we're presenting questions. It does not constitute or build or establish an attorney-client relationship. And we are providing general advice and guidance to be able to help you navigate the legal questions and concerns that you may have. Of course, if you're trying to evaluate if you have a case, what you need to do, additional steps, always consult an attorney. If you want to reach out to us, we are more than happy to consult with you to discuss your situation, your legal situation. And as you can see, as the banner is going below, these are all the platforms for which you can follow us. We're on IG, we're on Facebook, as well as we're on YouTube. You can follow us also on LinkedIn, but reach out and we're more than happy to discuss those things with you. Today, yes, I love educate, empower, and unify. And that's what it's about, because the thing is, people perish for a lack of knowledge. And so the thing is when you're better equipped, when you have the knowledge and the insight on how to deal with certain matters, how you show up changes, what you're able to do changes, how you're able to communicate, it changes. So it's really important to go out there and seek knowledge. And so when you're talking about the legal arena, most people sometimes have the mindset, well, I don't have a need for an attorney, or I don't have a legal issue. Always look for opportunities where you can gain knowledge. Okay. And so as we all are joining on, share with some people, invite some people to come and join you on this live. Today, we are discussing understanding personal injury law. Understanding personal injury law. And so we have some questions that people have already sent in that we will address. Of course, this is an opportunity for the questions that you may have as we're discussing this topic, to shoot those, post them in the chat, whatever questions that you may have, and so that we can try to answer them. So that way you kind of know what decisions you need to make moving forward. But just as I have asked you all to share for other people to be able to gain this information, I'm going to make sure that I do the same. Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. So let us be sure to share with family, friends, loved ones, colleagues, whoever you may know, and just let them know, this is a topic that's going on. Maybe you've encountered a personal injury case before, you know someone who has. The more information, the better. And good evening to everybody who's joining on. And if you're joining, and when you come into the chat, if you want to share like where you're joining in from, that's perfectly fine. I will tell you the firm, we practice in Mississippi, Georgia, and Texas. However, even though a lot of the information that we share, sometimes it's going to be general, right? And so you can take that information to at least give you some insight or a starting point. And then if it's something that you need to dig deeper into, you'll be able to do so. All right, I am finishing up my sharing. All right, so with that, we are going to go ahead and jump into it, okay? So one of the questions that we received is, how do I know if I have a personal injury case? How do I know if I have a personal injury case? And so the thing is, with personal injury, it's kind of what it says, right? So if you've had a situation where you've been injured in some type of capacity, you're 9 times out of 10, you have a personal injury case. And there's various types. But so individuals who may have had a slip and fall, typically what we see and what we handle a lot of is auto accidents, right? Someone has rear-ended you. Someone has failed to yield to a stop sign or to a red light, and they T-bone you. That's a lot of what you hear and a lot of what people are familiar with. But you can have slip and falls. You have people who are injured at apartment complexes because they had obstructions or things within their parking lot or in the apartments themselves that they were aware of and they didn't fix, and something happened and caused the injury to somebody. And when you go to kind of break it down, what all of those damages look like, it could get more detailed. But basically, it's when you encounter some situation, an accident that causes an injury to yourself. Now, when I tell people, because sometimes we get a lot of calls and people are like, "Can I sue this person?" You can sue anybody. You can sue anybody. The thing is, do you have the damages and can you recover? That's always going to be a factor to consider. But there are various ways. Also, another type of personal injury is medical malpractice, right? You also have individuals who are potentially injured on the job. And sometimes, depending on the circumstances or the nature of the personal injury, how it's going to be addressed, how it may be labeled, if you will, is going to look different. And so that's why it's always important that if you think you have a case, consult. It's always in your best interest. It's always in your best interest to consult with legal counsel, because as we'll see, as we're kind of going through some more questions, sometimes people can hinder their potential claims if you don't do so. And even in answering, how do I know if I have a personal injury case, I end up answering an additional question when we said, what type of incidents qualify? So auto accidents, slip and fall, medical malpractice, injuries at work. Those are the type of things that that occur, and they will be labeled as personal injury cases. This is one question that's coming up next that people are. Good evening. My wonderful mother is joining us. So happy to have you on. What type of, how much is my personal injury case worth? Everybody wants to know that question. Everybody wants to know the answer to that question. And it's a good question to have. When you're dealing with personal injury, what I would like people to understand is that it's based on your damages, right? The first thing, what is the number one damage most people incur? It's going to be the medical bills, right? Because typically you're going to the emergency room, you're having the treatment, the care that's necessary to first check you out and kind of see what's going on. Then there's the potential that things are identified and you're going to have additional care that's needed, whether it's therapy, whether it's surgery, various different things. But the first aspect of evaluating a case is going to come down to the medical damages. Now, you also have potential damages that are not, they're non-economical damages, as we refer to them. That's your pain and suffering, emotional distress. These are things that per se, they don't have an exact number tied to them, because you didn't go to a doctor and they say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to charge you, $2,500 to treat you for this emotional distress, right? It may come in a different form. Maybe you are doing therapy. Maybe you are doing counseling. But you also have those factors, even though they're non-economical, that something is attributed to them. So I can give a broad example. So if, for instance, we're dealing with a auto accident, and maybe the individual has $20,000 in medicals, right? Well, the attorney may evaluate it, looking at all things, and say, okay, well, we're going to multiply this. We're going to multiply this by 5 based on the type of injury. If it's now you have some injuries that are more severe than others, right? If you go and it's more of like deep tissue injuries, or it's like, oh, I had to have, a surgery for a dislocated ankle or something of that, it's going to change the dynamics of your case and what you're looking at. And so it's not a broad, oh, every case is worth this much. Every case you'll have this multiplier. It's going to go case by case basis, because every case is different. For instance, several years ago, I worked on a case with another when I was an associate attorney with another firm, and we had a case where an individual had been hit by an 18-wheeler. The injuries and things that people suffer in those type of accidents are very severe. They truly are. This person was lucky, thank God that individual survived it. But you dealt with that. You got policy limits, right? They had policy limits of $1 million. Well, that's what that person got in that case. But every case is different. And so what happens is that you'll sit down with your attorney, depending on, and you'll discuss everything. This extent of your injuries, the treatment that you have to have, how long you may have to continue treatment, if there's the prospect for future injuries, because sometimes you can have injuries that even though you've been treated, they can have lingering effects years down the line. And that is also something to be considered. Okay. But it is a case-by-case basis. All cases are not the same. What is the statute of limitations for filing a personal injury claim? So this is one where I tell people, soon as you find out about injury, soon as you think that there's a possibility that you have a claim, you want to go ahead and you want to consult somebody. You want to get the ball rolling on it, because most cases when you're dealing with auto accidents, for Texas specifically, right, you have a 2-year period to be able to bring your claim against them. And 2 years may sound like a lot of time, but it's not. And I'm not pretty sure this question is coming up. Like, I've heard many people, they'll contact and they're like, well, do you think that I need an attorney? I mean, it's ultimately always going to be your decision. But what I will tell you here recently, we have come on to help 2 different individuals who they felt as though they wanted to handle it themselves. And that's not a problem. It's not a problem. There are actually some cases where it's really not that significant, right? Maybe you have something where you didn't really have any injuries and they're just going to pay your property damage off, and they're probably going to pay you a couple $1,000s just for the inconvenience, right? In that situation, you may not need an attorney. But if you are going and you've had multiple treatment, multiple care, and say that you're even speaking with the insurance company early on and you're not getting anywhere, do not wait to the last minute to try to reach out and get legal counsel. It puts your claim and your opportunity to recover in a hard place, if you will. We had 2 cases where we come on to help individuals and they're like on the brink of their statute of limitations running. And so it's like, oh, if you don't file this case within 2 days, if you don't file this case within a week, guess what? You lose out on everything. And you don't want to do that. You don't want in these situations for it to be the last minute before you take any type of action. Okay, and so one of the questions that we have that came up in the chat, and this is a good one, and it happens. You have people who will ask this: should I go to the hospital immediately after an accident, even if I don't have any pain? I would say yes. And why? Most people don't, right? And it's totally fine. It's not a hindrance to your claim. It's not a hindrance to your claim at all. But what typically happens, so say, and now I would say the cases that I typically see this in is this individual has been rear-ended. They're like, well, I don't feel any pain. It just kind of shook me a little bit. 9 times out of 10, a few days later, my clients are like, I'm having this back pain. I'm having these back spasms, or my neck is hurting a little bit. And so they didn't feel this at the onset. And typically because it's adrenaline, it's the rush that you have, right? And so you're not thinking about that. Everything else is kind of consuming your mind, your thoughts, and all those different things. And your body, you haven't really got the time to sit in it, if you will. And so I typically recommend to people, go, because sometimes too, you may have injuries that you're not aware of. And once they actually do the scans, they can identify things. But if you don't, that does not mean that you can't, because what happens in those situations where people don't immediately go right after the accident and they begin to experience pain, they're like, oh, well, I can't go and I can't get treated and I don't have a claim because I didn't go immediately after the accident occurred. That is not true. I've helped many of clients who didn't have pain or any onset of pain until days after, and we were still able to get them the treatment that they needed, because ultimately what's happening is that you're trying to get the person back whole. You're trying to get them to status quo where they were before the accident. So when it comes down to the property damage, when it comes down to different bills that you are incurring as you're trying to be treated to get back to the place that you were, right? So wonderful question. Is it recommended? Yes. If for whatever reason you don't go, it's okay. It's okay. You're still going to be able to get your treatment. You still are going to be able to pursue a claim. I would say I even had my own personal experience with that, being rear-ended. And like I say, that adrenaline rush, you don't feel any pain. It's just like, oh no, I'm fine. 3 days after the fact, I was like, oh, this back is really starting to feel irritated. And went to the ER. And when it all was all said and done, insurance company took care of all the medical bills. It was just for that period, muscle spasms here and there, muscle relaxers, take those. Everything was good to go. A couple $1,000s for the inconvenience that was suffered. They fixed the vehicle and everything was good. Okay. What if I had a prior injury and the accident made it worse? Would that hurt my case? So that's what we refer to as the eggshell rule. And so what that means is that any individual who is at fault for an accident, they have to take you as you are, right? So say that you had a knee injury and somebody rear ends you and that knee hits the dashboard and it exacerbates the injury that you already had. Well, guess what? They're responsible for that. Now, are they going to come back and try to negate exactly how much should be attributed to them because it was a prior existing injury? Yes, they will. But the thing is look, if my finger was broken and it was in the midst of healing, and you came and you did something and you caused it to be severe, you caused me to have to go back and get surgery, any additional treatment that I needed, you're going to be responsible for that, even though that injury already existed. But it is one of those interesting areas that you have, because sometimes you have a lot of back and forth with the insurance companies, or if you get to the point that you actually have to file suit and saying, look, everything that happened from the date of the accident on is that person's responsibility. So yes, very, very great question. And so no, it doesn't hinder the case. You're just going to have need an attorney who's going to advocate for you to ensure that you're getting your rightfully what's due to you. And I think I kind of touched on this. We had a question: do I need a lawyer if I've been in a car accident? I tell people yes, like I say, unless it's something very minuscule, because the insurance companies, how they function, how they operate, they're going to do everything that they can to limit any payout to you. And as I told you, 2 cases that we have now, these individuals were kind of strung along, if you will, to the very last minute. And had they not made calls when they did, they potentially would have lost out on any potential recovery they could have had. And I see it often a lot here in the past several weeks, these ads, and maybe you all have seen them too. Oh, you don't need an attorney. You can jump on here and do X, Y, and Z. I'm just like, that doesn't sound copacetic. It doesn't sound right. And another thing too, when it comes down to these types of cases, auto accident specific, you're looking at how much insurance an individual has, right? So when I see these ads and they're like, oh, I had this fender bender and I got $100,000. Be careful of falling into the trap of those things. And just like, oh, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this because I seen an ad and they just said they were barely bumped and they got $100,000. Everything that sounds good isn't good. Or if you heard it this way, if it sounds too good to be true, 9 times out of 10, it probably is. Please be careful. Please be very, very careful. Should you, a friend, a loved one, anyone that you know, find yourself in an accident or having a personal injury case, consult with an attorney. And you're able to, as I always tell people, get a feel and determine whether or not that attorney is a good fit for you and is expressing what you need in regards to pursuing your best interest. Okay. Okay. So what is PIP, also PIP? And is that included in my personal injury? So PIP is personal injury protection. Now, so this gets down to the nitty gritty of like insurance policies and what's included and what's not. So people can carry PIP. It's basically medical bill coverage, right? And typically you see it ranging from 2,500, 5,000, it could be more. And what happens in those situations is, so if I were to run into someone and I'm at fault and they go to the hospital, well, my insurance will pay them out the PIP. They would pay out to the provider, the medical facility. They would pay them out for their medical bills. Now they're still able to recover additionally, right? Because I have additional coverage, but the PIP is mainly for medical bills that an individual incurs. Also, I want to make, since we're kind of touching on it, I want to address this because unfortunately I've had some people, a handful of people over the past several months found themselves in not so good space because they didn't have this type of coverage. Uninsured and underinsured coverage. You want to highly consider getting that. I would say that you don't want to drive your vehicle and not have it. Because what does that mean? So say for instance, somebody hits you, right? And you have an accident where you're incurring medical bills of $50,000 and say they only have 30,000. Well, already they don't have enough to cover all that you're out of. Now you have an underinsured policy, right? So now you can go and tap into your policy to be able to recoup additional funds to cover your damages. Or say, as we often hear or encounter, is that somebody hits you and they don't have any insurance at all. So here it is, you need to go to the hospital, you need to get treatment, you need to go to physical therapy, and you're concerned with doing it because you're like, how is it going to be covered? Well, if you have uninsured, then you will be able to utilize your policy to cover those damages. So these things are not automatically included, right? Typically what you have is an opt-out. And a lot of people opt out because they're like, I don't need this. I don't need that. But you always want to look when you're evaluating policies, look specifically for that, to have the PIP, to have the uninsured and the underinsured policy coverage on your insurance policies. And I think that answers the question. And I love sometimes how this flows because we'll get into the questions that come through and then we'll answer them. And then I look and I'm like, oh, one of the questions was, what if the other person doesn't have insurance? Make sure that you're having that underinsured or uninsured coverage on your policy. And so insurance is, you never know when it's going to happen, right? And hopefully, and also too, when we're doing it, we're hoping that it doesn't, but you never know. And in those instances, when it does and you don't have it, it doesn't pan out well. And I hate to have those conversations with individuals to say, well, you don't have any recourse. And let me say this, because I get this a lot. And as I mentioned kind of earlier on when we started the live, you can sue anybody. The thing is, can you recover? If you are injured by an individual who doesn't have, specifically talking about, let's say, auto accidents. If someone hits you and they do not have insurance, can you still go and sue that person? Yes, you can. But I will tell you this, if they're not paying the, 75 to 100 something dollars to pay for insurance, even if you go and you get a verdict, there's nothing for you to recover. And this will end, I know I've seen this question further down somewhere. Someone was saying, what is a contingency fee? Because typically in personal injury cases, most attorneys, I haven't encountered one who doesn't do it this way. We handle the cases on a contingency fee basis. So what that means is that you don't pay anything up front. And the only way that you're paying anything is if we recover for you, either in settlement or trial. Okay. And 9 times out of 10, if they don't have insurance, It's going to be hard unless an attorney can uncover that this individual has assets somewhere, and for whatever reason, maybe they just had a lapse in their policy or something. It was an oversight. But if that's not the case, it's going to be a hard sell for an attorney to take on that case and to front all of those fees and expenses that come with trying a case and all those different things to potentially not be able to recoup them. And so that's why I tell people, consider having you some underinsured or uninsured coverage, because there are people out there driving and they don't care and they don't have any insurance at all. And if they injure you, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to have any recourse. How long does a personal injury case typically last? Oh, this is another good question. And I will say that it varies. Why is that? Because in some cases, the treatment that an individual needs, right? I think I began to speak with you all earlier about the 18-wheeler case that we handled. That one took, I want to say it was like over 3 years. And the reason for it, you can imagine this individual and the damage that he had, traumatic brain injury, all these different things. So continued treatment and all the things that were needed to get him back to a good space. I mean, it took time, right? And so, because typically what happens is that your attorney is not communicating with the insurance company until you finish treatment, because they want to make sure that everything that's needed is necessary. And if there are any like future surgeries or things of that nature, those can be presented. But typically, you're looking at potentially 6 months to a year for those cases that are pretty straightforward, right? Sometimes you may have a situation that you're not getting anywhere with the insurance company and you have to file suit. In those instances, you're probably going to have it going on for a couple years. Now, I know we try to get in and we try to get them resolved as quickly as possible. But of course, you understand, like, you have all these moving pieces with medical records, insurance company, if they're changing adjusters, if you're not getting anywhere, then you have to file suit. And what happens when you file suit is that then you just begin to go through the procedures as far as a lawsuit is concerned, discovery, depositions, all these different things to see if you're at a place to potentially get a case worked out without having to go to trial. Oh, a question. Should I speak to the insurance company before talking to an attorney? My advice is no. The insurance companies are not out to benefit you. They're not out to help you. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. And they're not out to help you. They're going to be looking for inconsistencies in your statements. They're going to be looking for different holes. They're going to be looking for different things that they could utilize to minimize your claim. So with that being said, make sure that you're protecting yourself from beginning to end. Make sure you're protecting yourself from beginning to end. We have a question here. How is fault determined in a car accident? So basically what you're looking at is you're looking at the laws or the rules of the road, if you will, right? So I think this one for all of us is common. We automatically know who's at fault. You're at a stop sign. A person is not braking in time and they run into the back of you. They're at fault, right? And what happens too is in some instances when it's not clear cut. Let me give an example of this. So say, in areas where you have a walkway, a crosswalk. If you don't utilize that and someone hits you, we're going to argue. Your attorney is going to argue, well, that person, the driver, is still at fault because you're supposed to be vigilant. You're supposed to be watching the road. But what happens in Texas, what we have is comparative negligence. And so in those situations, you are going to have it's evaluation. Like, if you're 49% or less at fault or responsible or have some responsibility for the cause of the accident, then you're going to be good to go and you're going to recover. It's just going to be reduced. And so every accident or every potential injury, it has to be evaluated case by case, right? We had a situation of a young lady who had a flat and she was stopped on the highway, and she ended up being rear-ended. It was like a four car accident, right? And one thing that came up in our mediation was just like, okay, what is a jury potentially going to say about this? Will they feel as though, she needed to make whatever efforts to actually get off the highway? Will some people look at it and say, no, she did what a reasonable person would do? And so it's going to, the factors are really going to play a part. And first, you're looking at the laws. What do the laws say? Are you supposed to yield? If you ran a red light, then you're automatically at fault. If there's a thing where two people they fail to comply with some type of law or ordinance, then it becomes down who is more liable than the other. Is it okay to post on my social media account about accidents and vent? No, it is not okay. Social media is great, but many people have hurt their causes, have hurt their claims because they are posting on social media. The thing about it is what you post, it never goes away. You never know who is watching. You never know what they're able to get access to. And you can think, oh, well, my page is private and it's locked down and nobody can get access. No, I've had cases. I've had cases where we're arguing a particular point or trying to use a particular basis for damage. And because of what they were able to recover from social media, it negatively impacted those arguments. It negatively impacted those claims. I mean, here, let me give you an example for this. So you have an individual who's hurt at work, right? And they're getting workers' comp or the temporary disability and things of that nature. And they're saying like, oh, they can't stand up. They're having back issues. But say then there's a photo on their social media of them golfing. That contradicts what you're saying, right? And then you just want to be careful when you're actually venting and you're sharing too much information. We are in the age of, in trials, social media, screenshots, text message, all those different things are fair game. And you just have to be mindful. Everything is not for everyone. Don't post it. Do not post it. In a 4 or 5 car accident, who would be at fault? So with this one, multiple parties could be at fault. Multiple parties could be at fault. I will say in the one example that I provided, that individual, we actually recovered a little bit of something from every party, but the one who we would think was mostly at fault, listen to this. They did not have insurance. They had no insurance at all. And let me share this tidbit. If my client hadn't had that uninsured coverage that I spoke about, the outlook of this case would have been significantly different. So that's a prime example of a case that I've recently worked. It hasn't even been a whole year since this case has been resolved. Very recently, where somebody was in a situation where the party at fault didn't have insurance. And she had some, they weren't as severe as it could have been, but she had some, some damages that were worth considering that needed to be addressed, right? And so there's a possibility for there to be some type of negligence attributed to every party. In most situations where what you sometimes see is that, let me give this good example, because for people in Texas, you might be more familiar just because sometimes what we deal with the traffic, right? In Mississippi, my Mississippi people, not as much traffic there. You encounter it sometimes here and there if you're like in the Jackson area. But so here, you all know how we're just like stop and go on the highways. And so you might have, so if you end up with a pile up, it is the possibility that the last car, people are all going to point and say that vehicle was at fault because they failed to stop and everybody else had stopped in time, right? But one potential thing that you can raise is sometimes you all hear car length, space in between. You can say, well, hey, this person didn't stop and, have enough space in between us. So even though they were hit, had they stopped and then, leaving enough space, they eventually wouldn't hit me. Arguments to be made. Is it strong? Is it going to get you anywhere? That's a totally different discussion for another day. But there's a potential for everybody to be attributed some negligence. But sometimes it's like that last vehicle where everybody begins to point the finger at that person. However, even when you get to a place of settlement negotiations, there's a possibility that you work something out with all parties involved. Can my passenger sue me in a car accident? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. So say that you're driving a vehicle and you do not have the right of way, and you go through the light and an accident occurs and you're in violation of the traffic laws. Your passenger who is injured, if they're injured, they're going to be able to sue you. They'll be able to sue you, your insurance, if you will, to recover for their injuries. So yes, the passengers can sue the drivers of the vehicles. So we had a question here about what if I was partially at fault for the accident? So what happens there, then it becomes a question of percentages, right? So let's just use easy numbers. So, say you have $100,000, right? And 100, that's what your claim is worth. That's what it's been. And say you're in a situation or you're a trial and the jury has ordered, hey, we're going to order that this person gets $100,000 for their damages. However, with that, we found out that they're 30% liable for the accident and the other party is 70%. Well, when that kind of shakes out, you're going to get $70,000 because they're going to deduct what they have attributed to you in regards to your responsibility to it. And so that's how it works when we talk about contributory negligence, right? The legal term. But it's just like, hey, you have a part to play in this. Is 30%. When we look at it and we're weighing the numbers, we're going to say it's about 30%. So yes, we were going to give you $100,000, but since we think that you're like 30% liable, deduct $30,000 from it, and you're going to go home with $70,000. Can I get compensation for pain and suffering? Yes, you can. This is one of those non-economical damages that I was referencing that there's not per se a number you can put into it. When cases get more severe, like for instance, the 18-wheeler case that I mentioned, you potentially have experts coming in who are dealing with various things, life expectancies, different attributes of a case that they will begin to evaluate and potentially put together some numbers, if you will, to assist in making that determination. But yes, pain and suffering is an area for which you are allowed to recover. Can I take a loan out against my lawsuit? Is that wise? Yes, you can take a loan out against your lawsuit. This case that I'm telling you all about, because remember I told you it took like it took a good amount of time for it to get resolved. I would say no. But I also understand that sometimes people are in trying situations and circumstances and they're trying to survive or take care of their necessary needs, right? And that is totally understandable. What I will say is use it, don't abuse it. Because in this case, after you have $1 million settlement and you deal with your attorney's fees, costs, expenses, all these different things that were, paid up front to deal with your case, well, guess what? Those loans are going to have to be paid back. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not issuing those loans unless your attorney is signing off with you, guaranteeing that they're going to get their money. Right? And if your attorney signs off on it, and after speaking with you, and that's totally going to be the decision that you're agreeing to it, your attorney is going to make sure that they pay it off, because ultimately they don't want to come back and be sued, or ultimately they don't want to come back and have this particular loan provider not willing to issue loans to their clients because they found out that the attorney doesn't stand by the obligations, right? So you can do it, I would say, to the extent that it is avoidable, avoided. Because what happens is, yes, the money is good at that point of time. Totally understand. But what happens is then once you finally get your settlement, if you had multiple loans, all of that is going to reduce what you eventually end up taking home. So you definitely can. And two, those providers are evaluating how likely, it is for you to recover from your case and things of that nature. But yes, you can take out a loan against it. I would say it's definitely not wise. Have a conversation with your attorney, right? Because if you're at a place and it's totally needed, then by all means, if you got an attorney who cares about you and what you're doing, they're going to give you good advice, right? And what I would say, and even if you have to get one, don't keep going to continue to get these loans just because it's available. Because as I stated, when it comes down to settlement purposes, you won't have anything left if you have to pay all these loans back. And to that extent, it's a little bit different, but I know people who've been in accidents and then they feel as though they can't go get care because they don't have personal medical insurance, right? Or individuals maybe don't have enough of that PIP, that personal injury protection payment, right? And what we have had to do for some of our clients is what we call letters of protection, where there's providers who are willing to treat you and give you the necessary care that is needed with the premise of having an agreement from your attorney to say, look, I'm going to ensure that your interest, which is, your bills for the services that you provided, are going to be covered, right? And so there are facilities that we personally partner with to ensure that our clients are able to get the necessary treatment that they need. I'm sure other attorneys do the same as well. But if you have been injured, don't sit back and think, well, I have no recourse. There's nothing I'm able to do. There are options out there. You just need to be able to, as always, consult. Don't try to do it on your own. Reach out to counsel and have those conversations so that they can get you taken care of. Are lost wages recoverable in a personal injury claim? Yes, they are. Yes, sir. And so what we do too, when we have clients and for whatever reason, depending on what type of injuries they have, and the doctor is recommending for them to be off work for however amount of time, we're making sure that information is noted in their medical records. We're making sure that they have been provided, slips or letters or whatever the doctor is going to provide to saying, look, this person can't return to work, right? And then we're also making sure that the employer is providing us with documentation, sufficient documentation in regards to days that has been missed, what the pay was. And so that way those totals are accurate to be presented for recovery. But yes, those are a type of damage that you are able to recover should you miss out on work because of that. Now, for those who are entrepreneurs, it looks a little bit different, but you are in a position, well, if you are injured and you cannot work, they can be recovered. Is there some additional analysis and things that need to be explored in coming up with the number? It does, but you can recover for lost wages. So after my case has been settled, if I owe child support and have additional medical expenses, will that be withheld before the settlement distribution? So we have yet to encounter a situation where child support has become an issue. Now, if for some reason, which would be unique if they knew about it, but crazier things have happened. And if there's something that like a suit has been brought against you and they know about the potential proceeds, something can happen there potentially. But typically when it's anything owed with child support, you have it where they're filing suit against you, they're bringing you to court for contempt, they're attaching, a lien, quote unquote, to your tax refunds when they make the notifications to the federal government, the IRS. But I have yet to see it come up in a situation where they're able to come in and get someone's settlement from a potential personal injury claim. But I don't say that to say that it's not possible. I've never seen it happen, but I've seen crazier things, right? But specifically, one that we always deal with is the medical expenses. Now, separate from a situation where we were discussing the letter of protection, right? Where we're telling the provider, I need you to treat my client. We're going to ensure that your interest is protected and that you're going to recover when we settle this case. For those instances where you are going to get just like your necessary ER treatment and things of that nature, your attorney personally has not provided any communications to those providers to say, we're going to ensure that these bills are being paid off. However, your attorney is going to, would want to, let me say for us, we are always in a position to say, look, let us negotiate these bills, because ultimately it's to make you whole, right? You don't want to have lingering medical bills out there, collectors calling your phone, you have this bill outstanding here, that bill outstanding there. And so what we do is we make efforts to negotiate those down, right? To negotiate your medical bills down. So where that way you're limited in what you have to pay back to them, which ultimately gets you more money in your pocket. Recently, which was one of the kind of surprising to us, we had a facility to say, look, we don't negotiate with the attorneys anymore in regards to medical bills. So you can tell your clients to reach out to us and they can work something out. And personally, my response to that is, okay, I mean, that's your prerogative. If you're dealing with me, you're guaranteed to give something. If I give it to my client, if they decide not to pay you, then they decide not to pay you. Do I recommend that? No, I do not. But I say that to say is that I think we all know that a lot of people have medical bills that they're not, unfortunately, able to pay for one reason or another. So with that, and typically what happens is you get your settlement, right? The attorney's fees and any upfront expenses are going to be deducted first, right? They're going to be working to, and how we would do it is that we would go ahead and disperse. Once we have this settlement agreement set out and we're saying, look, this is all the money that's coming in, everything that needs to go out, we can go ahead and disperse X amount to the client. Client, we're going to work on negotiating the rest of these medical bills down. If they agree to it, then what happens is you're potentially going to get another check from us. If not, we're going to take care of all these medical bills and you're not going to have to worry about anybody paying. And so basically everything is covered in those distributions. Can I recover for loss of consortium? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So you have an injury. Your spouse is injured, right? And you all are not able to be just to live the life that you all lived prior to the injury, right? The spouse potentially has the spouse has a valid claim that they can bring as well. Most people don't for various reasons, but there is that potential to bring a claim. And you will see it for individuals who are married. When they do the settlements, 9 times out of 10, they'll have it where the spouse has to also sign off on the settlement as well. Why? Because they don't want them to come back and to pursue a loss of consortium claim. So yes, you can come and say, hey, I haven't been able to be with my spouse for 3 to 6 months because they had to be in the hospital or receiving surgery or recovering because of, the negligence of your insured. Oh, this is a great question here. What should I bring to my first meeting with an attorney? Everything that you have. Because we've done some and I think we may need to redo it. What to do right after an accident, right? So if you've taken photos, you should have the case report number. You should have your initial discharge papers. You should have insurance information in regards to the at-fault party. Everything that you have that's related to that accident, you bring it to your attorney. I say you come and you just throw everything at them, and then you let your attorney decide, okay, this is useful, this is not. So anything that you obtain, any information that you gathered during the time, shortly thereafter the accident, you want to bring all of that information, right? You want to Sometimes when we meet people, sometimes when we have consults with people and they hire us on, they've probably been to a couple treatment facilities already. We need to know every facility. We need to know who is treating you, so that way we can go and we can request those records, right? If you know, like I say, if you have pictures of the vehicle, of the scene, you definitely want that. And most importantly, well, not most importantly, but also with that, is typically what happens is once law enforcement comes out, they're going to provide you with a case number and say, hey, when the report is ready, all you have to do is go to this website. Most states, I know Texas, I know Mississippi, they have a site where you can go and you can pull the crash reports when they're ready. And so they're going to provide you with that case number. Your attorney needs that, right? There's probably other ways that they can go and recover it, but the case number is going to be sufficient. Let me make sure. If you have any last minute questions, okay, I just seen one come up. What do I need to do if I call the police to come take a report of the accident and they don't show up? What can I do? Interesting. And I love these questions because sometimes you're just like, do these things happen? Yes, they do. We're handling a case right now. The police never showed up. This is when it's vital, where it is vital for you to take pictures. You want to take pictures of everything. Take pictures of the vehicle. Take pictures of the scene. Get the other person's license, right? Take pictures of their vehicle, their license plate. To the extent that you can, you may or may not record any conversations that you are having. One thing that I will say about in Texas is that if you are a party to a conversation, you can record it without having the other person's permission. Okay. I try to make those disclaimers because there could be potential issues there, right? But if you're a part of the conversation, you can record it, but you want to document as much as you can. And you want to immediately, and also this, when I say we asked about talking to the insurance company, and what I'm referring to is actually making statements in regards to how the accident happened. That you don't want to do, but you do want to go ahead and notify them that an accident has occurred. And typically when that happens, they'll say, hey, do you want to provide a statement? No, I'll get my attorney and we'll come back and we'll do that. So, and there are instances, and you would be like, why would you have an accident and the law enforcement doesn't show up? I don't have the answer to that question. But even with that being said, you can still pursue it. Just document as much as you can so that you're safeguarded. Okay. And so with that being said, as always, we're hoping that this information is helpful. We do want you all to, I know we had put it out last week, just trying to make sure that this time is conducive for people when we are starting at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you have other time suggestions, please feel free to share those with us. You can comment it. You can send us a DM. However, reach out to us and let us know. Also, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, follow us on LinkedIn. Go and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, right? Because we're going to be putting out a lot of information that's going to be beneficial and helpful for people. Also, we send out a newsletter once a month. The link is placed in the chat for you to go and get signed up for our newsletter. You don't want to miss out. We're just, whatever information that we think is beneficial to you all, we're starting to provide that. If you have questions and ideas for our topics prior to the next Wednesday or at any point in time, share those with us. Comment, DM, whatever is most suitable for you. Provide all that information. Also, you can scan this QR code right here. Takes you to our website, access to all the information that's available if you have an ongoing legal issue and you need to discuss some things further, right? And this is not necessarily the form because we're providing general guidance and information. Scan that, reach out to us, schedule a consultation. As I say, McCray Stewart and Associates, we are your trusted advocates for justice and peace of mind. You don't have to navigate whatever legal issue that you're doing by yourself. Let us come and help you, and we will guide you and give you direction and come alongside you, okay? But never hesitate to reach out to us. It's a pleasure and a privilege for us to be able to come and provide this information and this insight. We are truly here to serve you all. We are here to serve you all. But with that being said, Thank you all for joining on. For those who are going to watch the replay, type hashtag replay just so we can know. And whatever information you may need to, if you have some questions, put them in the chat. This is it's ongoing, so we can pull those, and we'll have another session where we can bring those answers to you all as well. But you all have a wonderful evening, and until next time, you all have joined Wise Counsel Wednesday.